Welcome to Voices from the Bench, a dental laboratory podcast. Send us an email at info@voicesfromthebench.com or look for us on Facebook at Voices from the Bench. Greetings and welcome to episode 193 of Voices from the Bench. My name is Elvis.
And my name is Barbara. Your nose sounds better.
A little bit.
Still a little nasally, though.
It is. It's a lingering cold. I cannot believe that it's still in my system, but hopefully soon it will be gone.
Well, you sound a little better. Not great, but better. How's your week going?
Pretty good. I was out in Ohio last week visiting labs, and something happened that I really wasn't prepared for as a traveling salesperson.
Yeah?
And that is snow. Snow happened.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry for your luck. It's 75 here in Florida.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. I'm wearing a sweatshirt because it was 55 this morning.
Yeah, we barely had snow here in Indiana, but when I was out in Ohio, I bet you they got 2 inches the day I was out. Of course, by the next day, it was in the 40s and it was all gone, but that's just a whole new aspect of traveling I've never really considered, but it is what it is.
All right.
I don't think Preet will give me Southwestern territory just for the winter, maybe.
Probably not. But I'm glad you got a pre-plug in there, partner.
Always have to. So this week, we're going to get right to it. We're taking a break from the recordings we got at the Whitmix Digital Forum, and we'll be back next week with more. But we wanted to bring you a conversation we had with Kenn Butler, who's the head of R&D at Dandy. Now, Dandy's a company that came into our industry and disrupted what really has always been known as the traditional dental lab. There are many people online and at conventions talking about Dandy, and most of them, honestly, really didn't know what they were doing. It was a lot of rumors that were going around. So at Lab Day East, Kenn found me and told me that Dandy is ready to come on and tell everybody what and why they are doing what they are doing. Now, the podcast will always be a platform for anyone in our industry to come on and talk about anything related to the industry. And we definitely understand that many don't like what Dandy's doing. And we also know that many are joining them in this new way to produce restorations. Barb and I don't take a stance other than we want to give people an equal platform to have a conversation about the topic.
True to that.
But with that being said, Kenn comes on the podcast to talk about how and why Dandy came to be, what they've learned along the way, and what we really appreciate him coming on for is he answers some of the rumors that I've heard over the last few months.
And I have not, just saying.
And Barb has not, because she lives in her own world.
Exactly. In Florida.
Now, I am going to pre-apologize. This one does have some barking dogs in the background.
Oh, yeah. A few.
A little more than usual, but I couldn't edit it all out, so I apologize. But this is a good conversation that people definitely won't be yawning during. So join us as we chat with Kenn Butler. Did you know that most in-lab MCX5 users that have ordered BURS from Grow3X once keep on ordering Grow3X BURS over and over again?
No way. You know what? I didn't know that. Why do you think that is, Elvis?
Well, I think it's because Grow3X BURS are engineered by some of the same folks who have been providing BURS to some of the largest U.S. production labs for years.
Did you also know that most Roland and DGShape users have no idea what they are missing out on?
Well, I think I can guess what they're missing out on.
You are right. Most Roland and DGShape users have absolutely no idea how good and great Grow3X BURS are because they think that the Grow3X BURS are only for the in-lab systems.
Well, they are wrong.
To give Roland and DGShape users the opportunity to find out for themselves how great the BURS are for their machines, Grow3X is now offering a buy 3, get 2 BURS free special. This is exclusively for Voices from the Bench listeners, you guys, so please go support them.
So all you simply have to do is go to the Grow3X website. That's grow3x.com, click on BURS, then select Roland and DGShape, add 5 BURS of your choice to your cart, click on checkout. Enter the discount code B3G2. That is B as in boy, the number 3, G as in girl, the number 2, BURS, and check out.
That's awesome. You know what? We actually have a code, Elvis. Boom! That was easy, guys. Go for it. Free BURS, use them, and use them well.
And we appreciate your support of the podcast, Grow 3X.
Thank you.
Voices from the Bench. The interview. We are super excited to talk to Kenn Butler from Dandy. Now, Dandy is a subject that our industry is talking a lot about these days. And Kenn's agreed to come on to kind of set the record straight. So how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Elvis.
Awesome. So, Kenn, how to start, really? Let's just start with, what is Dandy? Why did it come about?
Sure.
I want to know, how did you create the name?
Oh, there's a great story behind that. Okay, sure. So let's rewind the clock back to around 2018, summer of 2018.
Okay.
The business actually used to be called Orthly. We actually started out as a completely different business. We were a direct-to-consumer clear aligner company competing with Candid and Smile Direct Club. The big difference with our model that we were trying to go down was that rather than doing, mail-in impression kits or smile shops, as Smile Direct Club calls them, we decided to try and partner with GPs. And effectively, the relationship was, hey, we're going to do the Facebook marketing. We're going to get patients in the door, and we are going to do almost all the work for you. The only thing that we ask for you, GP, is that we're going to give you free patient flow. You just need to go through, chat with them, do a quick screen, make sure that they don't have anything really, really bad going on with the existing dentition.
Which is a lot more than Smile Direct did.
Exactly. Right. We felt like we were actually doing the right and the responsible thing. Dentists would take either a scan or they would take a physical impression, and then they would send that off to Dandy. We would go through and send that case up to effectively be designed by one of our in-house treatment planners. We also had a non-staff ortho at the time. So this is where the business started. It was originally started by two Penn students, and for basically a whole bunch of different reasons, they were in the middle of school. The business ended up shutting down. Come around 2018, one of my good friends, Tony Alco, actually ended up meeting one of the original co-founders. His name's Daniel Hanover. The two of them got together, and basically Dan was telling Tony about the Orthly business and the interesting dynamics that were going on in the clear aligner industry, but that they decided not to run Orthly full time. It was just too much between that and school. However, Tony, ever the entrepreneur, thought that this was an interesting idea and spent basically the entire summer going through and figuring out, hey, how can we reboot this brand? Basically, a whole bunch of lawyers had to be involved, paperwork had to be shuffled around, but at the end of it, in summer of 2018, Tony and Dan rebooted the brand as Orthly, and a week after that, I had known Tony for a while since then. Tony shoots me a text. He says, hey man, what's going on? How you doing? I'm like, screw you. I'm not doing anything right now. What's up? What do you want from me? Told me about this clear aligner opportunity, and that is how the business was started. We had a very, very small amount of friends and family investment, and also just decided not to take paychecks basically for the first 6 months of Orthly's business as we got it effectively rebooted. Through that process, we grew the team to about a dozen people or so. We were actually doing, I would say, fairly well. And the way our business would work is that we would go find GPs and give them this pitch. It's like, hey, we're going to give you basically free patient flow. You just need to check these cases for us, take impressions for us. Great. What that started evolving into was, oh, wow, scans. We realized very early on that scans just resulted in fundamentally more accurate impressions than physical impressions in our experience. So that was the only thing we had going on. It was like, wow, there was almost like a 40 to 50% reduction in first try failures on clear aligners when we used an intraoral scanner.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. And I definitely agree on my end of the scale. I didn't really like scanning at first, but now I just love it.
Yeah, now, I can nerd out for hours about the history of intraoral scanners and scanning in general, but I'll keep it the long story short. We would go and actually start offering these doctors, hey, if you go through and join Dandy, we'll send someone out to train you for free. And we thought that was just it was a way to solve our problem because doctors were struggling scanning in some cases. They just got the scanner. They wanted to work with Orthly. And we noticed that, oh, hey, doctors really perked up at this. They really liked that idea. And so I started basically hitting the road. It was effectively our first trainer going through. And what I would do is I would go to these practices. And the day I arrived, I would look at the scanner that they have, doctors finishing up some procedure. It's another 10, 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. I would open up the tutorial videos of how to use scanner XYB be it a Carestream, be it Nitero that was standing in front of me. And I was, learning as I go, picking this up. And I was personally shocked because, like, wow, with 15, 20 minutes of like scanning knowledge, and also the fact that once you use one scanner, you kind of got the hang of all scanners. You start understanding how scanners work in general. It became easier and easier to teach our doctors.
So at this point, Orthly is not providing scanners.
No, not
You're
yet.
just working with doctors that have scanners in order to work on their clear aligners only, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep. This context here is going to be. This is all going to fall together once we get to
Sure.
today.
Yeah. I'm just making sure. Keep a track.
Well, I'm just proud that Elvis is following. So.
Yep. So with that, I also ended up finding myself actually using basically every other scanner on the market. And slowly but surely, I started to like form my own opinions about what was a good scanner, what was not a good scanner. It comes to the point where, I felt pretty comfortable training folks on how to scan for clear aligners. Doctors started to ask me, hey, how do I scan for a crown? And in the back of my head, I didn't say this out loud, but I'm like, what in the world is a crown? I have no idea what this guy's talking about. I know ortho really well. I know that all too well. Nothing on restorative work. So, just the classic pattern. I go back to the hotel, and I just basically spend the rest of the night up until like 2 a.m. Learning about restorative dentistry, understanding the lab side of the business, and also watched a couple videos on how to scan for crowns. And I'm like, oh, this makes total sense. Okay, now I get what this is. That's called a crown. Got it. And then go through, start teaching our doctors how to scan for that. And a little light bulb goes off in my head, and it takes months for this idea to develop and share with the rest of the team. And it's like, yes, that's interesting, but let's focus on this clear aligner business. And the concept was effectively, hey, we're going into these doctors' offices. We're noticing that they're not comfortable using a scanner, even though at this point, it's objectively a better way to take, in our opinion, right? We've learned a lot more since then, but like at that time, we were like, oh, this is objectively a better way to take impressions.
Yeah.
Let's just go through what would happen if we just started training our doctors on how to use this for our clear aligner workflow. So I'm going to put a pin in the training component. The other thing that happens at the same time is that one of our larger practices, this is in the Orthly model, was started with physical impressions. But because they were doing so much volume, we actually did the back of the napkin math, and we realized, hey, it actually makes sense for us to buy this guy a scanner and teach this practice how to use the scanner, just because it will result in an enormous amount of cost savings on the back end for us. We don't have to go through and remake half of our cases that don't fit on first try.
Interesting.
So we go through, we purchase this, we go through the training, the official training for the Trios scanner, because this is after months and months of training and using all these different scanners. We ended up having the opinion that the Trios, even at that time, was probably our best bet. We go through, we train up the doctor, and there is like the hypothesis ends up playing out. It's like, oh wow, there is just we paid off that scanner in 4 or 5 months, just purely from cost savings on not having to do remakes.
On just clear aligners too.
Well, to be fair, clear aligners, right? Like we're talking $2,000 per case. As like a baseline from a lab perspective, it is much easier to pay off, and the economics work there. So all this is happening. We're starting to form opinions on intraoral scanners, and we're starting to think the gears are starting to turn in our head. 2 things finally happen, I want to say, around the end of 2019. First, I go to Tony and Dan, and I'm like, hey, we've got this interesting thing going on with our scanners, but I think there was just a general sentiment that Orthly was not growing the way we wanted it to. It was doing fine as a business, but we were looking to try and build an incredible industry category-defining business. And we didn't feel like we were on that path with Orthly. The behemoth that was SDC and Candid and Invisalign, we thought was too much to overcome.
Okay.
The second component was that as one of my trainings, I asked one of these doctors, hey, can I see an example of your lab invoice? Can I see how much you guys are paying for crown and bridge work? Lo and behold, I saw like, it's like $120 for a Zirconia crown. I go back to the hotel that night once again, and I look up, Zirconia crown dental lab pricing. And right at the top of that list, it said $34 next dental lab Zirconia crown.
Yeah.
It was very obvious, like so painfully obvious that this is a Chinese outsourced crown. However, in my mind, it was like, that doesn't explain, like my gut was just like, that doesn't explain a $90 difference just from outsourcing overseas, because there are additional costs that you end up incurring. What the heck is going on? This spun this whole idea that effectively ended with us realizing, hey, a lot of the technology that we've built to manage our clear aligner workflow and production workflow actually translates over really well to lab production, particularly when it comes to purely digital restorations like Zirconia. So what if we went to our doctors and said, hey, we are a dental laboratory. Let's just start with one practice and let's work our way up. We go to our first doctor, the doctor that we bought the scanner for, and we said, hey doc, if you got a couple crown cases coming up, we'd love to just for free do your crowns for you. You can still send it to your existing lab, but we want to see what kind of outcomes we can get. So sure, great. We take his intraoral scan. We found a great partner lab. They designed the crown for us. All we knew is like, hey, the technology that we built here to transfer orders around actually was pretty seamless. Even on order number 1, that we get that crown, Tony has to wake Dan up to get him onto the Amtrak to hand deliver our first crown from New York to Philadelphia. We go in, and the first crown doesn't fit. Contacts are too tight.
Oh no! I was going to say I would have thought that would have been perfect.
So contacts are too tight, and this is how we learned about interproximal contact tightness.
Oh yeah. Oh god, yeah.
And so we realized, is like, oh, hey, interestingly, and actually in retrospect, is like this doctor actually just had a preference where the contacts were actually fine. He just needed to do a little bit of final shaping. The lab that we worked with, generally they found that their doctors preferred that. Mm-hmm. This doctor, on the other hand, wanted something closer to a drop-in. Obviously he's still on the floss to pop, but he didn't want to have to do chairside adjustments. So we redesigned his crown, we redelivered the crown, and that fit perfectly. And then the next 5 crowns also fit like a glove. And then we decided to, get a little fancy. We decided to try a 3-unit bridge. Also went flawlessly. And for us, that was enough to say like, oh, interesting. We might be onto something. There might actually be something interesting here, because the other reality of working with pure digital cases is that you go to any average lab, about a third of that space and a third of that headcount is dedicated to doing one thing. It's working with plaster.
Yeah, the model room. Yep.
Right. It's like if you actually look at your lab, right, it's usually very consistently about a third of that square footage and headcount is just easily ditching dies, articulating them, scanning them back in. If you're
also the dirtiest,
With us, we very quickly, like this is where things started going back to back. Things started falling in place in our head. It was like, oh wow, if we actually go through and start offering free training to doctors that had scanners but weren't comfortable using them, and also figuring out ways to get scanners into doctors' hands, we become the trainer, we could become the provider, and we can actually deliver really, really good restorations while still being able to offer a scanner and still making our business model work. So this was effectively the Nexus moment. This is also around the same time that we rebranded from Orthly to Dandy. This was, it was just an enormous time of change for us. We decided to effectively shut down the direct consumer clear aligner business. We still do have a B2B clear aligner business, but we decided to go all in on this idea of being a digital dental lab. And this is over the course of like maybe 30 days. Yeah.
You completely switched gears.
I mean, yeah, for us, it was like because we did that, and then we started going to our other doctors, and it's so hard to explain the feeling. The startup term is called product market fit, which is effectively you've finally discovered a product that people want to pay for. And you don't know it until you don't know that feeling until you go from struggling to selling a product to you cannot keep up with the demand. It basically happened within the span of 30 days.
Wow.
So at this time, you're still using your partner lab, right? You didn't create a lab yet. You just went to change your name. You knew that you wanted to train and do the scanning, but you still don't have a lab. Is that correct?
That is correct. And to be honest, even if we had to do it again, I would very, very much do it that way. And I can get into effectively the benefits of what we internally describe ourselves as a hybrid dental lab, not necessarily one that is pure outsource. And I think outsourcing generally like it connotes with, you're outsourcing to China or outsourcing overseas. We actually just straight up don't do that. All of our production is still US based.
Well, that's good to know. I like that.
Yeah. What we end up doing instead, actually, sorry, I am jumping the gun here, but Barbara, I think you'll like this. We actually, no, it's totally fine. We actually do have a lot of technicians on staff at this point. I think over 50. I've read comments online about it's like, we don't see any job postings for Dandy. They don't have technicians. Like, no, we got a lot of technicians. you just don't see them. The thing there though is that because we're offering solid work-life balance, free healthcare, we really care about the technicians that we hire, let them work from home. We're actually realizing, I was looking at effectively our headcount the other day, and I also realized 50% of our designers are women. And that wasn't even like a deliberate decision that we set out. It was like, we want to index for this. It was just the way we treat our technicians and the way we give work-life balance. We want to make sure that we got the best talent, and the best talent that consistently comes to Dandy has been really great women that are technicians, and particularly CAD/CAM savvy ones.
Nice.
Okay, so you started doing crowns just for a handful of doctors, and everything's going to a lab. So you're just a pass-through at this point. When do you start saying we want to hire our own designers?
That happens. So there's actually an intermediary step, and I want to touch on this.
Yes,
the intermediary step is I hate the word middleman, and
Okay.
for very obvious reasons. Because for us, there's a couple of critical components that Dandy collects that I think Elvis, you as a former lab owner, will really appreciate. For one, we are actually the ones that handle all of the billing and collections. You get a guaranteed payout as a lab. You get a guaranteed payout from Dandy. It is on us to actually go and collect from the dentist. You don't have to worry about, oh, if I do this work, am I going to get paid for it? We handle all of that, including calling out outbound. You don't have to hire additional administrative folks or bookkeeping to help try and manage that process. The other thing that we do is we effectively act as the first filter for our labs. So I'm sure both of you guys know this, where doctor calls in and they're making a big fuss on the phone. They have this critical thing. They really want to talk to a technician.
Mm-hmm.
They finally get the technician on the phone, and their question is, "Hey, so when is my case arriving?" An actual, like a borderline nuclear bomb of time waste just went off. And almost every lab I've been to, like, that bomb keeps going off. That's the thing at Dandy, that we act as that filter. We have our own internal operations team, support team, IT team. They are the ones that effectively filter out all of that from the technician. So a Dandy partner lab, even around this time, we kept it pretty simple. We're going to send you cases. We're going to get all the information about this doctor's preferences, how they like their contacts, how they like their staining to be done, like all the nitty gritty preferences that you learn about your doctor over time. We will collect up front and learn with you. In return, we're going to filter out all the noise for you. Even though we can bring you a fair bit of volume, you don't have to hire a whole bunch of other administrative overhead in order to handle that volume.
Wow, makes sense.
So this is where I push back along when we were talking about middleman. It's like, no, Dandy does a heck of a lot of work for the lab side as well. So this model is working, this model is growing. And Elvis, one thing I do want to address, I get asked this a lot, because our Facebook ads, they say, hey, just sign up for Dandy, get a free scanner. For the vast majority of our life, the majority of our doctors that joined were just doctors that already had a scanner. And time again, it was a Trio scanner that they already had. They either were using it only for very specific scenarios, or they just weren't using it at all. Maybe they didn't want to pay for training, new staff, their head assistant that was great at scanning left, and they didn't feel like teaching themselves, whatever it may be. We would go in and just say, hey, look, we will be your lab. We are digital experts. We have the staff and the resources to support you going digital and transitioning away from analog impressions. How about you just go ahead and try Dandy out? And of the initial doctors that we got over 2020, even during pandemic, I think of those, probably 2 to 3% of them have left. The other 97% have stayed with Dandy since.
Wow.
That's good.
That's
retention.
a pretty high percentage.
Yeah. I mean, this is the whole idea, right? Because if you think about the traditional feedback loops that exist between the dentist and the technician, right? Particularly when it comes to physical impressions. The dentist buys their impression material from traditional distributor like Shine or Patterson. Maybe you're buying 3M impression material. They're taking an impression and then they're sending it to their lab tech. It's not the 3M rep that picks up the phone and calls the doctor and tells them, hey, your impression doesn't look good. It's not the Shine rep that tells them. It's their technician. It's the technician that not only tells them, hey, doc, I can't see your margin. I might have to even go chairside and work with you and figure out what the heck is going on here, see what's up. But for some reason in the digital workflow, for a whole host of reasons, right? The workflow that we have is the 3M rep and the Shine rep are the ones teaching the doctors how to take better impressions, not the technician. Dandy is effectively the first lab that actually provides feedback as your lab on how to be a better intraoral scanner. And right, because for us, I'm not Shine, I'm not Patterson. I don't make money selling scanners. I'm not in the business of equipment sales. I'm not in the business of trying to renew your annual subscription or sell you more training. I'm in the business of being your lab. And the better you are at being an intraoral scanner means that it's a lower remake rate for me, which means it's better economics for me. That's it.
I definitely agree with that because, like I said, we get a lot of scans in that are pretty good, but we don't train our docs on scanning.
Right.
So basically we get, however they were trained, we get the scan in, good, bad, or indifferent, and you're kind of stuck there because, we don't train them.
You just deal with it.
Train them properly and get them on the right road and doing things accurately so that you keep your remake at 2% or whatever you said. Actually, you didn't. You said you have 98% of your clients, but to keep your remake factor that low.
Yeah. I wish overall remake was that low.
You're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in remakes. I know that for sure. So yeah, that's huge money.
Yeah, exactly. To be honest, like I really do think a lot of this has to do with the lack of digital education, particularly on the laboratory side. I mean, look, you go to any dental technology school today, even the premier third-party courses, there's like maybe 1 or 2 CAD/CAM courses. There are techs that are graduating today where the only thing that they've done is hand waxed gold crowns and maybe stacked porcelain.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? In 2021? It's ridiculous. To tie this all back into the original question, Elvis,
Yeah, no, it's all good.
when did we actually start hiring technicians? We ended up getting to this point where, hey, we're doing a lot of work and we were able to grow, but we're starting to hit the ceiling of what we can do without having to take some work in-house. However, we really, really strongly believe in our hybrid model. We actually did not want to go into running our own lab and doing the production work. What we decided to do instead was start hiring technicians to focus on the design aspect, because we realized intraoral scans are accurate enough that, and milling machines, frankly, at this point are accurate enough that whatever the designer designed should be borderline identical to the final restoration that gets delivered out. Should be. Keyword should.
Yes, should be.
Yep. And for the most part, that hypothesis played out. We started hiring technicians in-house to design using CAD/CAM. And that started as a small endeavor just to test if it would work. And again, there was just another step function change in the remake and repair rates. We basically cut it in half for cases that were designed in-house. It's not because our partner labs were bad technicians. It was just that we could actually enforce a much greater level of consistency throughout our designs and throughout our design philosophy that we couldn't through our partner labs. At the end of the day, right, they have their own cases that they still have to design, whereas for us, we can focus just on the dandy doctors and those dandy cases. Part of that path, and I'm curious actually what your experience is on this, you guys. We actually had to go through, for some of our partner labs, and untrain some habits, particularly when it comes to fitting crowns on 3D printed models. What we found was that, like in a vacuum, the milling machine is more accurate than the 3D printer, particularly at labs, right? 3D printers that you see there are Formlabs printers, Sprint Ray printers. Even if you have a carbon, that's where you have to be in carbon territory and maybe the new Asiga Max territory to be able to get roughly equivalent accuracy from a really nice 5-axis milled crown versus a printed model.
I agree. Yeah.
Right. And so what we were seeing was that technicians, if they found that the contacts were tight on the model, they were adjusting the Zirconia crown. And then we would start noticing open contactor. It's open in the mouth.
Yep.
And so one of the things that we had to basically teach everyone was like, and this is actually funny, we actually noticed that we would have lower remake rates for modelless cases from day one than it was to print a model, because the model is deceptive. and every technician under the sun is trained to, trust the model. The model is the source of truth. And again, one of these things that we have to teach our labs is like, no, this is the unintuitive part about digital. Your crown is funny enough your source of truth. Just leave it alone and trust that what the designer did is accurate. This is exacerbated by the fact that most of the labs that at least I've seen that aren't quite as quick on the digital uptake, they'll have fair-sized digital departments. But because the technicians downstream, the ones that are actually experienced, they don't have the patience to teach the digital designers on how to design their contacts correctly. They find themselves actually being the ones that shape things at final restoration and fit it to the model instead, right? So they never actually teach their technicians, hey, this is how you should be working with digital cases. They just fix it instead because this case has got to go out today. Once you start sitting in the lab space and you look at how digital is treated, Dandy starts to make a whole lot more sense, at least in my mind. Yeah, the question was, all right, if we had to start from stage one to do a digital only dental lab, what would you do differently? You do things like bring design in-house. You do things like training your doctors yourself to do intraoral scanning. And right to the natural conclusion that we came with at the end of 2020, which is, we got to start doing design ourselves.
So how do you train designers?
So this is the trade-off that we've decided to make. We know what we're good at and we know what we're not good at. We know we're good at operations. We know we're good at technical support. We know we're good at software and technology. We are not good at training technicians. So the trade-off that we made was, well, let's just hire good technicians from the get-go instead. And I'm sure this is what's fueling a lot of the discourse I see online about, Dandy's taking away all the good technicians. I do want to make it very clear. We actually have never actively recruited a technician. We've only had Indeed postings and job listing postings, and we have used third-party agencies, but we have not actively gone out and recruited our own technicians. Everyone that has joined Dandy has joined of their own volition and just like they frankly believe the Dandy vision.
You just talked about the elephant in the room, which I was going to ask anyways, because I don't know any of that stuff that's online. Obviously, Elvis does, but can't any company hire any technicians in the United States freely? I don't understand. Maybe, Elvis, you can help me. What is the backlash here? What are people saying? Because I don't know.
Well, kind of hard to sum it up because there's a lot of opinion out there. But
Well, I'm not. Yeah.
no, yeah, but there's a feeling that Dandy is taking good technicians out of labs, and they're not putting them in a lab. They're putting them in a workflow that's taking business away from labs, even though it is a lab. Does that make?
The workflow is an interesting way of phrasing it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not a
It's
traditional
it's a good
lab,
point.
and I think that
Yeah.
is a lot of the issue.
Right.
But why, though? There's so many variations of laboratories and designs and milling, and look at all the manufacturers that are manufacturing and doing their own designing, and the manufacturers that are turning into laboratories now.
Well, how do you answer that, Ken? That is basically
Well, Barbara just, I'm like grinning over here. It's like, wow, Barbara just gave my answer.
Oh, sorry. But honestly,
even coming into this topic, I'm torn.
Yeah.
You're right. It's a disruption to the industry. It's providing another source for dentists to get restorations that's not through your traditional brick and mortar lab. But at the same time, it's providing, from what I hear, good wage and a good job for technicians, which is what we should all be about.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, every single one of our technicians right now, they're paid salary. They have free healthcare. As of right now, they also get equity incentive as part of joining Dandy. Like at the end of the day, where I mean, like we don't live out in the stratosphere. We know exactly what the kind of business we're building. We are building this with our technicians hand in hand, and they should have a portion of this business as well. They rightfully deserve it. I think that mentality is definitely lost on a lot of labs for sure. However, the other component here, because I think part of the other sentiment that's going on is like, oh, Dandy is killing the industry. I've definitely seen that post a couple of times.
is what?
Is killing the industry, right? Is like killing small businesses, killing small labs. And I'm looking at that, and I'm like, I mean, not to put a fine point on it, but like us over Glidewell, DSG, NDX. Are you kidding? Very actually happy to say that all of our partner labs right now are independent businesses. We don't own any of them. Like that's not the kind of business model that we're trying to develop. And frankly, actually, this is one of the talking points that we have with Dandy, and one of the reasons why we're successful. Think about how we work with quite a few labs at this point, and think about this. There are thousands of labs across the United States, and dentists spend a heck of a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, which labs should I be using to get the best results for my aesthetic cases, for my removable cases, yada, yada, yada. We've done a lot of that legwork. Like we actually have at this point like a pretty good understanding of who's good at what across the industry. We go through, we like meeting people face to face, we get sample work from them, and we get to know these labs. What that enables us to do is if a doctor calls me and says, hey, I want a number 30 A2 pre-shaded zirconia monolithic crown. Well, okay, I don't need to send that to the most aesthetic lab in the world to finish it. I can send that to a production lab that has, good quality, good standards. They have good quality control, but at the end of the day, the aesthetic requirements for that number 38.2 nowhere near the same as your feldspathic porcelain 6-unit veneers.
Yep.
To that same point, though, if a doctor calls Dandy and says, "Hey, I have a VIP client here. I need you guys to send this to a technician. I need you to have your best technician working on this," right? What they mean is that they want some Japanese technician who's permanently hunched over with his loops on. He saw the founding of Noritake himself. Like he wants that guy to work on his case. Great. I have another partner lab that can do that. And the beauty is that we can go through and actually, we're limited by the speed of light in terms of what lab can work on what case. The moment the doctor hits send, if it needs to go to an aesthetic partner lab, if it needs to go to something that specializes in orthodontic appliances, that's how long it takes for that lab to get that case. And that's all they get from Dandy. Like there's a consistency component to it where this lab is not getting an unpredictable case set. It's like we tell them right up front, hey, you can expect this kind of restoration request from us. That's all you need to focus on. That's all we're going to send you.
So what do the labs get out of all this? Because you talk about you hire the designers, they design it, and then it goes to these partner labs. Mm-hmm. What do they get out of it?
They get work. It's actually just that simple.
They're charging for the restorations, yeah.
So you pay them just to mill, stain, and send it out?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously we have different pricing agreements because at the end of the day, we're taking all the administrative overhead. We're designing the case. We're managing all of this. But yeah, at the end of the day, we're sending them work for them to finish out.
So let me ask you a business question because I have that here.
Sure.
You've got designers that are off-site, and then you've got your laboratory. How do you communicate between the lab and the designer and yourself if the designer's contacts are too tight or if their centrals aren't good or aesthetics aren't good? Do you have that dynamic or are they all just that good? I mean, how do you lead your designers off site, and get the information back to them that they need help or adjustments?
Sure. So this is, I would say, Dandy's hidden secret. We're a software company. We're a software company that happens to operate in the lab space. And what I mean by that is that we've built our own platform entirely from scratch, our own order management platform. And so part of what we've built natively into this platform is companion software that helps designers figure out, how they are performing, compared what the doctor feedback is on their cases. And they also get to know for each individual case, part of their prescription for every doctor is their design preferences as well. So they get to actually calibrate and adjust their design based exactly on what that doctor needs. And they don't have to have 80 cases with that doctor for them to finally get a feel of what the doctor likes and doesn't like. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So you do the preferences with the doctor before you all ever start working with them, and then the preference go in the system. The designer knows exactly how they like their contacts.
Yes. You want to know, you actually just touched on this. You want to know what Dandy's hidden superpower is? We don't accept incomplete RX forms. They have to be filled out. Doctors are not allowed to submit a case with an incomplete RX. So we're not sitting there with a chicken scratch on the back of a napkin trying to figure out if the doctor wants an A2 or something.
That takes a hell of a lot of the communication out of it if you do that, because they can't press
Exactly.
until everything's filled out. Okay.
Yep.
That makes a lot of sense.
You don't have any of those half shades? Those are my favorite.
A2 and a half.
A2 point.
We've got
point what?
Point what? Yeah, I've definitely seen a couple of those, at least in the free text field.
So does the designers know which lab they're using? Is it always the same designer, same lab?
No. Yeah, no. The designers can find out if they want. To employees, it's no mystery. But for the most part, we've gone through and vetted and really worked side by side with our labs, where it's what the designer designs is exactly what the doctor is going to get. Unless you, as the partner lab, are QCing something, you're like, ooh, something is majorly off, right? At the end of the day, this is still a back and forth, and it's a partnership. There have been plenty of instances where the partner lab flags something, the designer's like, oh shit, yeah, I did miss that. Let me go back in and fix that.
Yeah. So if a doctor calls in and has a specific technical question, how does that work? I mean, that's what calling a brick and mortar lab is able to handle.
Yeah, so look, we still have over 50 technicians. A good chunk of those are nothing but support for doctors as well.
In your location or at home?
They still work from home.
Okay.
Here's the difference, though, right? Even in our experience, even doctors asking technical questions about a case, it doesn't need to be the tech that's working on your case.
No.
If they're asking something, right? That's actually the vast majority of them. Even if a doctor is asking a complex question about, I don't know, path of insertion for a multi-unit bridge, how should we group them, splint them? You don't need to be the one working on that plaster model to be able to answer his question.
Yeah.
And so I think this is one of the counterintuitive things about Dandy is that, hey, the beauty of digital is that I can pull up your impression anywhere in the world. I can pull up the history of you as a doctor anywhere in the world, and I can give you a great answer, most of the time, a great answer to your question. The only scenario that the current model doesn't maybe support is hey, if the doctor wants to ask something and you need to have that case in front of you in your hands. And look, we're not sticklers about it. We set up a call for the doctor to be able to get on the phone with the specific technician that works on their case. But we avoid it at all costs, not because we don't want the doctors to talk to technicians and find the answers, but because we have an agreement with our labs that the whole point of Dandy is to save them time. Mm-hmm. And if they're finding themselves doing the same thing, answering doctor questions on the phone, then what's the point of working with Dandy?
Yeah.
True.
I'd rather get the full amount from the doctor.
Yeah.
Exactly. The whole point was just trying to give you less work to do. Not more.
Do you want to answer how much you guys charge for a posterior zirconia crown?
I can give you a vague answer for this, right? Obviously, doctors that do more work get better pricing.
Okay.
If you've seen Glidewell's price sheet, you're about in line with our pricing. Okay. We are obviously a smidge higher because, we're giving you a scanner for a lot of our practices. Sure. We're giving you free training. But at the end of the day, it's around in line. Yeah. We don't have absurd, I don't know, $250 zirconia monolithic pricing.
Sure.
At the end of the day, Jason Kim, Luke Kong, they're really good at what they do. That's their model. That's not us.
Well, I just want to make sure that you're not out there selling the $35 crown or something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And you want to make sure of that because you're being impartial, correct, partner?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a thought online and in the industry that you guys are out there undercutting everybody significantly.
See, I haven't heard any of this. What the hell?
I spend too much time online, Barb.
Yeah.
I mean,
obvious. I think you're just the new company that everybody wants to talk about personally.
Yeah.
I mean, the dial moves, and I'm sorry to our listeners, but it always seems like there's one company that people want to go after or talk about that's not doing things like we want, or they are, or they're not. But sounds like it's you guys' turn to me.
And you know that, Ken, right? I mean,
Oh, 100%. No stranger to this.
yeah, it's a disruption to the industry and the workflow, and people are going to talk. I've heard a few people mention to me about your targeting ads against labs. I have seen an ad myself that says most dental labs are slow. Dandy can do it in 7 days.
Yeah. I'm going to pose a question back. So two factors. One, right, we're doing all kinds of online ad marketing. And at the end of the day, right, if we have a dentist that's Googling for a local dental lab, we want to be there on the front page as an option.
I will say this, with my new role at my job, I Google dental labs all the time. No matter what you put in, Dandy is always the first paid ad. You guys must spend a buttload. It never fails. And people ask me that, and I was like, try it. And they try it, and they're like, I just typed in Smith Lab, and sure enough, Dandy's right there.
Yeah, if we're going to call it the PR answer, I actually just don't know what the heck goes on that side. This business is large enough now that I don't need to know the day-to-days of every department.
Somebody's doing something right, I'll say.
Somebody's doing something over there, yeah. There's this second component, too, which correct me if I'm wrong, but the vast majority of the conversations I have with our doctors, like the zirconia crown is actually a great example. What is the average turnaround time for a single unit zirconia crown?
6 days.
Actually, I was at 6 days.
6 days.
Is that true at your lab?
Yeah.
Does that include shipping, or is that 6 days in lab?
No, we try to do 5 days in lab, but yeah, shipping's usually 1 day or 2 days there, 1 day or 2 days back.
Right.
But the single units, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and guys, look, I don't need to put a fine point on it, but obviously you guys kind of knew what you were doing and had a pretty solid business going on with your labs. At the end of the day, the vast majority of our doctors that we talk to regularly talking 10 to 14-day turnaround times on zirconia.
Who
now,
are they
part
using?
of this, right?
They must be sending it overseas.
China.
Man,
Yeah.
Look, obviously, you can look at all these notes from all of our doctor calls, right? We obviously asked them like what their previous experience in the lab was. Time and time, the average turnaround time for a zirconia crown is about 14 days. It might not be advertised as that, right? But at the end of the day, like these are small businesses, production doesn't always go as you plan.
Oh, sure.
And right, and very, very often these doctors will talk about, I have a 14-day turnaround time on the crown. This, by the way, and I think this is important to call out, this includes the time it takes for the impression to be shipped out, right? So we are counting, so from the doctor's perspective, they are counting from the day they finish taking that impression to when their crown is back in their hand. With something like digital, again, I'm limited by the speed of light and someone's internet connection. With a physical impression, I'm limited by, did the driver come and pick it up?
Oh, yeah.
Did the FedEx guy pick it up? Did it get lost at the hub? And those are all the things that, at least for intake, they just eliminate all of that. That on its own is what contributes enormously to the turnaround times. Never mind.
So you guys don't take physical impressions at all?
I am proud to say Dandy has never poured a single model for a case.
Good for you.
So when they send the scan in, most of the time it's Trios, correct?
Most of the time, yeah.
So who's doing the model marking and, the margin marking and all of that? Do you guys have a staff that does that, or do they do that?
Yeah, that's what our technicians do.
Okay.
We do have the occasional doctor that likes marking his own margins.
Yeah, so I could see where that would save you at least a day and a half, because if they go
Yeah.
out site and they're looking at the models and the margins and, you're waiting all that time, that's even another day and a half to save. So.
Oh, right. And also, sorry, this is a tangent, but one thing that people talk a lot about too is the accuracy of intraoral scanners. And look, the reality is intraoral scanners have actually been more accurate than physical impressions probably for the past 5-7 years.
Yeah.
And not only is it due to the technology, but also think about every time you translate something from one medium to another, you're actually losing a little bit of accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
So in the case of, right, from the analog impression, it's from putty to plaster. And you got to make sure that plaster was mixed correctly. We all know the times when someone just eyeballed the mix and didn't get it right. And then they also have to make sure they don't screw that up, and then they scan it back in. That's 3 steps of translation. Intraoral scan is 1 step. Tooth to scan.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, you start designing on that. That is inherently more accurate.
How do you guys handle consistency using different labs with different zirconia brands and different, everyone's shades a little different?
Yes. I mean, this is why we go through a rigorous amount of testing with our labs before we actually roll them out to our doctors. One, from our testing, truly 90% of the consistency comes from the design.
Mm-hmm.
It's really the variance in that final 10% is not as much as people make it out to be. Yeah. The mills are accurate enough now that, again, what you design is what you get. Now, obviously, this assumes that the labs that we have are maintaining their mills correctly and doing proper maintenance, but everyone we work with, they're following that.
But they don't all use the same Zirconia brand.
So this might be a hot take here, particularly with monolithic pre-shaded Zirconia. It's really hard to tell the difference.
It is, sure.
Right now, to be things like multi-layer Zirconia, like Katana, that there's still a market difference between brands, but even that, right, we're slowly coming to a point where it's just a commodity product. Yep. It's like, okay, who can pack their powder the cheapest? And I mean, it's all coming from Japan anyway. It's all coming from one Japanese chemical conglomerate. There's only so much you can do to change on the Zirconia side. Even with that though, like there's like internally we have like a list of recommended brands. We just find that the labs that we like working with, they gravitate towards a couple of brands already, so we don't have to do too much. I do see a world in the future where we really, really put all the Zirconia through its pacing, do some deep dive chemical analysis, and then we have a brand we recommend. But it's the amount of variance is so low that it's not really worth it for us.
Sure.
Not yet, anyway.
Interesting.
So they just ask for like multi-layer Zirconia, and they don't have you don't have like a name brand or anything? Because I can't imagine how you could if you're using several different labs and they're all using different Zirconias.
Yeah, well, multi-layer Zirconia do you have in your lab?
We're using Ivoclar Emax Prime.
Ooh la la.
Whoa, that's actually out of left field. That's not what I was expecting.
And then on the lower level, we use, the DSO level, we use Armand Gerbeck.
Whoa, okay, very cool. So actually, to be honest, 90% of the time, I get Katana as an answer. There are a couple other brands that our partner labs use, but we've put them through their paces. They look borderline identical.
Okay, that's cool. I was just curious how that works, because I know sometimes, when they ask for Bruxer, you've got to give them Bruxer, and we really tried to, nothing.
I want that Jimmy G Glidewell crown.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes those name brands, can hurt us a little bit. Not hurt us, but, you got to get that material
unnecessarily
if they ask for it.
How do you manage technicians that work at home? Do you require a certain amount of designs a day?
I know this is not going to be a great thing for listeners to hear. To be honest, I'm actually pretty far removed. I helped start it up, and I'm pretty far removed from the day-to-day on our Dandy Design Center now that I'm actually not 100% sure.
Good answer. Truthful.
Here's the one thing that I will say. The incentive to work at Dandy right now is not like, hey, if you're a really, really fast and consistent designer, you're just getting an absolute paycheck. That's just, frankly, it's not the case. This is the reason why we do salaried pay. It doesn't matter what you come up with. What we're optimizing for right now is just making good, high quality work. I'm not trying to do a $350 crown, but I want to do something better than the average in this industry. And so, yes, I mean, look, if you're designing 10 single unit posteriors a day, we have to have a conversation. Or if you're doing that 3 months into your job, right, we have to have a conversation. But what we care a lot more about is, right, do you have a low remake rate? Are you consistently meeting your metrics? Are you actually, helping build this business and build this brand? And there's a lot of things that we do to like make sure incentives are aligned. This is why we give the equity at the end of the day. Like, we want people to feel like they have ownership in what they're doing. And I find that to be a far more effective incentive than any form of unit pay or like base minimum requirement per day.
Do you just feed them the amount of work that they need to do? Are they required to do X amount by the end of the day just to keep?
Oh yeah, see now we're at the technical level. I actually have no idea.
Okay, you're right. Sorry.
I was just going to say, he said he didn't know.
I'm sorry. Just because he doesn't know doesn't mean I want to know.
If I had to guess, like we used to do things, they have to have a certain amount that they need to hit on average and then go above that, but not too far below that, and then track the remakes, because you've got to have goals, especially if you have equity in the company. Then your designers are going to want to make sure they hit those goals. So
100%.
It's just a guess, though, of course.
I'll be very honest with you, Barbara, your guess is as good as mine today.
Yep.
This is one of the nice things about company grows. You don't have to have every single part of the company in your head as you try and manage it. You can actually have great people that you hire and trust that they're doing a good job as well.
So let's talk about a rumor that's going around. Another one.
Okay.
Sorry,
oh boy.
My dogs are talking. I've been asked a few times if people think Dandy's eventually going to take everything overseas. That is, like a way that say, hey, we've built up this brand. We have the doctors. Now it's time to open up our facilities in X country and keep everything down to a minimum.
Interesting. If that does happen, it'll be after I leave this company for sure. There's a couple of inherent benefits. So like, look at the end of the day, like we've evaluated a lot of overseas labs. Not won't lie about it, right? We have tons and tons of samples from them. They still don't meet the quality bar that we're looking for. Very consistently, do not meet that quality bar that we're looking for. And frankly, when it comes to things like zirconia, and this is just kind of true of manufacturing in general, the amount of human labor required to make a zirconia crown has been like falling precipitously over the past 2 decades. And as a result, right, like actual labor savings doesn't move the needle a whole lot with things like zirconia. It's more about like, hey, how do you achieve scale and how do you start machining things more effectively? I think those realities alone, like forget the dandy dynamics, the realities of zirconia manufacturing alone basically dictate that the amount of cost savings that you get going overseas is minuscule, if any. That may change in the future. I don't have a glass orb. If I did, I'd probably be not at Dandy, but somewhere in Wall Street trying to make a fortune. But yeah, I think that's the answer I can give.
That's a good answer, I think.
It's a truthful answer, and I appreciate that. It's just something that a lot of people mention.
I'd like to know where the hell you're hearing all this stuff, Elvis. Jesus.
Online and at shows. I mean, it's a topic. Okay. People talk about it. It comes up quite often.
Well, all right.
Which is what disruption does,
A whole lot of new conversations that come out of it.
I'm curious, Ken, because you mentioned you didn't even know what a crown was a couple of years ago. How the hell did you learn all this?
Oh, geez. So there's one thing I want to touch on here. Almost all the best digital technicians that I've ever come across, they actually have that exact same story. They had a family member who worked at a dental lab. They had no idea what a crown was. They had experience with computer-aided design software, even from gaming, from an industrial background, whatever it might be. Those generally ended up being the really good digital technicians. They had no idea how to wax a crown. And I would say I somewhat fall into that camp. Almost everything that I've learned has just been by immersing myself. Like I for 3 months, I lived on site at one of our partner locations just to learn more about that system and help them iterate and improve production. And look, it's right. This is what I mentioned at the beginning. There's no good formal education system for digital dentistry. All the good digital dentists and the digital dental technicians taught themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think I fall into that category as well. So that's how I learned. Google, YouTube, Clydewell's YouTube channel is actually an incredible resource. Another hilariously niche but very helpful resource. Indian dental technology schools and dental schools in general post almost all of their content on SlideShare. I cannot tell you how many very useful data points that I found, or like useful terms and explanations that I saw on SlideShare, more so than any other dental technology textbook I found in the US.
Interesting.
Wow. That's a super good resource to have.
It's a very niche one. It was like you start noticing in like certain common themes and looks and aesthetics to them in Google Images, and that's you end up going down these rabbit holes. It's like, oh, hey, I'm trying to understand like the various class types of partial dentures. Great, you go to Google Images of partial class dentures. At some point, there will be a SlideShare with some explanation, and that is usually the rabbit hole that you can end up going down to learn all about it.
It's crazy. Can you hear me?
I think Elvis has been muting between his dogs.
Oh, I was like, what happened? I was like, well, we're at 55 minutes, so I think we did. I don't know. He's probably going to ask another crazy.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, look.
No, I'm sorry. I'm
sorry.
Sorry. These dogs are driving me nuts today. Obviously, you hear all the bad that people say in our industry about Dandy.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have to say to them? I mean, I know we've just spent the last hour kind of talking about it, but if you could give them a short answer when they say Dandy's terrible to this industry, what do you say?
So I'm going to give an antagonistic answer. And if we have to remove this, we have to. Antagonistic. I think. So are you familiar with the Dental Lab Network forum, Elvis?
Yeah, absolutely.
I am, actually, believe it or not.
So there's a thread on there that a dentist started about Dandy. And, he was just posting that the dentist, he was getting started with Dandy and was curious to get feedback on it. And immediately, the rest of the forum rips into Dandy in some way, shape, or form, which is at this point to be expected. But what I found so fascinating was that over time, as the doctor, right, this is actually at the core of Dandy's philosophy. We call it just like customer obsession. We just want to make the dentist have an incredible customer experience. The dentist over time kept saying relatively positive things about Dandy. He's like, hey, this training experience actually went pretty well. The hardware that they provided seems to be really, really high quality. Really appreciated the work that they've done so far. He even went out of his way. It was like, hey, I have some critical feedback on Dandy, which actually we really did appreciate him writing that out. I still don't have quite the level of confidence I want to be able to send my hyper aesthetic, like, $200, $350 a unit
Sure.
work to these guys. But everything else, like, I really understand Dandy. I really get it. I like using this service. At some point, someone in that forum accused him of being a Dandy shill. The same guy who opened this was like, I've never used Dandy before. I have some critique of it, but I'm enjoying the experience. And like, it was like a perfect microcosm of like what I always found troubling about the lab industry. There still seems to be this tendency with a lot of business owners, and I get it, right? Running a small business is so incredibly stressful. Speaking from experience. The reality is, though, is that I find that people have a tendency to blame dentists, right? It's like, oh, this is the dentist's fault.
It's always
for
the dentist's fault.
Change.
Come on.
It's always the dentist's fault. And like, look, you want to know what the novel thing that Dandy does? We don't blame our dentists. That's actually one of our points. One of the things, internally, we do not have a concept of a remake and a repair. For us, those are one and the same. If anything went wrong with that case, it was Dandy's fault. Even if the doctor said B1 in his prescription but actually meant C2, guess what? The Trios has color data. If we saw a B1 for a single unit, we could probably figure out that the B1 was the wrong selection. And it's that mentality that Dandy has that I think freaks out a lot of technicians, where it's just like, we don't like, this is the pattern that I keep finding, where it's like, there's no way Dandy can be doing as well as they're doing. They have to be having this VC model where they're hemorrhaging cash and just giving free scanners to doctors in order to get them on. It's like, no, you know what the dirty secret is? Yes, doctors join Dandy. They also don't leave Dandy because it's a fundamentally better experience for them.
Interesting.
And yeah, there's that component. I think there's also the other reality, which is there are certain types of labs that we will never be able to compete with. We cannot do same-day repairs, relines, procedures. Can't do custom chairside shading. We are, like, again, I keep bringing up Jason Kim, but like, Jason Kim's the perfect example. I'm not competing with Jason Kim for his doctors. Like, I know my lane. We are just trying to bring digital to the rest of the dentists in this country. Right now, it's traditionally just been something where only 20-30% of all dentists have had intraoral scanners. I'm sure a lot of them were things that were collecting dust. We're just trying to bring that higher quality, higher standard of care to the rest of dentistry.
Well said.
Yeah. You guys do more than just crowns. We talk a lot about crowns, but
yeah,
I mean, you do a full range of products.
Yep. Implant restoration, surgical guides. We are now rolling out our digital denture offering, partials, frankly, everything with the exception of full arch fixed restorations and sleep apnea devices. This is as of November 2021.
Yeah.
Those are the only two things that we don't do yet.
I was going to say, you dated it for a reason.
Yeah. So for those two things, not quite yet. Those will be ready soon.
How do you handle implants and abutments? Do you let the labs choose who's milling the abutment?
Oh, man, Elvis, this is a whole rant I can go down.
Uh-oh.
Okay. So for us, we actually dictate the vast majority of what gets used and where and why. Here's the reason, and I don't know if anyone at the FDA listens to this. If you are, please email me, ken@meetdandy.com. I have some thoughts. But here's the long story short. I want to say back in 2015, 2016, right, the FDA came out with a whole bunch of restrictions around what interfaces that you could mill. And again, another perfect data point where it's just like technicians are complaining that, the NADL wasn't fighting for them, that this is regulation is going to kill this industry. It's like, are you kidding? You're mad that you can't mill the interface on your Roland for an abutment? Is that the hill you're going to die on? No, of course you can't do that. The FDA actually made a very logical decision.
Yeah, it's actually smart. Yeah.
It's incredibly smart. However, I think that the one mistake that I felt like was made when it came to scan bodies, right? So we're an intraoral scanning company. We live and die by the scan body. One of the most frustrating components about implant dentistry, and actually you work at Print now, so I think you understand this fully. I'm going to give you an example like Zimmer. Every company under the sun just has an implant system that is a carbon copy of Zimmer. So why is it that I can't use a Zimmer scan body, either from Zimmer itself or one other 510K approved platform like NT Trading, Des, Medentica? Yeah. Why can't I use that scan body to manufacture a Zimmer blank from any one of those partners? If I have a Medentica scan body, I should be able to mill an NT Trading blank. If you, assuming, right, they both have the 510K approval.
Yeah.
And this is actually, what's comical? This is a solved problem. If you go into the 3Shape settings for implant libraries, they have a universal positioning system. So it's actually totally feasible to do this. The reason why this hasn't been that big of an issue so far, from our understanding of it, is that if you're the average lab, you're just screwing a scan body onto a plaster model that already has an analog in it, right? Because that's how the case was submitted to you. The issue around what we describe as scan body lock-in doesn't matter so much. It's like, oh, actually, do I want to mill this out of a desk blank? Great, I'll screw a desk scan body in. Do I need to unscrew this? I need to send it to Argent instead with an Argent scan body? Great, I can do that too. You don't have that luxury with intraoral scanning. And so for us, we've actually had to go to the point where we are providing the intraoral scan bodies for free to our dentists, just so that we can make sure they have the flexibility to be able to pick what kind of unit or restoration that they want. Because we do give them the option of having it milled, what we call milled from the authentic, versus being milled by an FDA approved generic. Which, right, not to put a fine point on it, but it's like if you had a Straumann tissue level, yes, you can send it to Straumann's milling center, or we can, save some money and you can mill it from another 510K approved titanium blank. The only restriction, though, is that you can't do that if it was like a desk scan body or a Straumann scan body. It would have to be something like an ELO scan body or a 3Shape scan body. There's a whole rabbit hole down there.
That is a rabbit hole.
I think there could be some change in language that would go a long way in order to manage that what we describe as the scan body lock-in.
Wow, interesting. Well, Ken, I think we've come up on an hour very easily.
Yeah,
I keep going if you guys want to. I can talk about this all day.
Yeah.
Well, I have a feeling that after people listen to this, they are going to have questions. So,
oh yeah, I bet.
Let's take the questions and let's have you back on sometime.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, really, I don't know. Let's not give an opinion. So, we appreciate you, Ken.
Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much. It was great to hear the Dandy story and to really hear what you're about and put some of the rumors to sleep.
Absolutely.
If you're a skilled digital technician and you're interested in driving the dental industry towards digital overall, look, I think you should come work for Dandy. You can find all of our open positions at careers.meetdandy.com. We're looking for all kinds of positions, and we're always looking for great digital technicians to come join our team.
There you go. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Awesome. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Whipmix is pleased to add the VeriCast OS, a burnout pattern print resin, to Whipmix's growing VeriBrand resin offering. VeriCast OS works with LCD and DLP printers in both 385 and 405 nanometer wavelengths. It prints accurate and detailed crowns, bridges, substructures, and RPD frameworks. It's durable and leaves no ash or residue. Since it burns out cleanly, VeriCast OS is ideal for investment casting and ceramic pressing. For optimal results, we recommend the Whipmix Resin Vest, which is a phosphate investment made specifically for burning out printed or milled resin patterns. Visit Whipmix.com to learn more about the VeriCast OS or any of Whipmix's other 3D print resins. A huge thanks to Kenn Butler for coming on our podcast. We really did appreciate you and Dandy for using our podcast as a platform to discuss what exactly you guys are doing and why you're doing it. It's important to note that what they are doing is not illegal or even morally wrong. You might not agree with what they are doing, but at the same time, you can't blame them for doing it. And again, our podcast is a platform for discussion. We welcome others to reach out to us at info@voicesfromthebench.com with questions and or comments that you have for Dandy, as Kenn has agreed to come on again and also answer some questions. But one thing is for sure, Dandy is here and they're not going away.
So I just want to add that I've reached out to a couple of individuals that work for Dandy as designers. And since I posted this podcast on Friday to announce it's going to come out on Monday, a couple have even reached out to me. I asked them because I wanted to know more about what's it like working for Dandy. And I told them I wouldn't release their names. But the ones I've talked to, all of them, say that Dandy treats them very well, pays them better than what they were making in their own traditional lab, and they really, really like working for them. And I think it's important to note that technicians are being hired and that they're having a good experience. I've also talked to a few labs that are their partner lab. I've run into them on my travels and at conventions. Not even one really had anything bad to say working with them. So like I said during the interview, I'm torn. It is a disruption to our industry, and it might hurt labs, but it also provides good paying careers for technicians. But we would love to hear your opinion. So send us an email or hit us up on social media. And like what Barb said, Dandy is here. Well, that's all we got for you, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.
Have a good one.
Bye. Things I don't miss about the lab.